Jesse, if you really want to get more zen, are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's do it.
All right. So we've got a lot to get to in rapid fire today, as always. With roster limits coming soon to college football, Notre Dame Athletic Director Pete Bevacqua is committed to honoring the roster spots for every current football player at Notre Dame. Bevacqua told Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports the Irish will also allow those who were cut to return to their respective teams. The announcement comes a day after the NCAA and Power Conferences made changes to the proposed House settlement. It would let schools grandfather in players who are currently on the roster, as well as players who've already been cut from the team, and high school recruits who enrolled at a school after committing to a roster position only to see it eliminated. So, the amendment to the House settlement has not yet been approved, which makes Notre Dame the first school to publicly commit to fully grandfathering in current athletes amid upcoming roster limits, which of course are going to be set at 105. So what do you think of all this that Pete Bevacqua was doing here at Notre Dame?
So let me get this straight. Basically, no one. So to me, there's like three situations. If you're a high school kid that committed and they basically said, we don't have the roster space, you could still now come back.
Correct.
Number two, if you've already been cut, you can come back.
Correct.
And number three, if you were on the team and there's the potential of being cut, you're basically being guaranteed that you're not going to get cut.
Correct again.
Okay.
Correctamundo.
Not often I go 3 for 3, especially after reading something. So what I think of all this, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around, especially when Notre Dame is kind of going to be, on the frontier of this and be kind of the first program to necessarily say, we're all going to let you stay. But at the end of the day, I don't think it can be anything but great or bad or good on behalf of Notre Dame on behalf of Notre Dame, because you're basically setting the precedent of, we're going to honor our word and our commitment at the end of the day, and not screw you over at the end of the day, not take away kind of your dream or this opportunity that you did earn, but now through the kind of transition of all these new rules that are coming about, you're not going to be the one to catch the short end of the stick, basically. And so
yeah,
I think it's really good on Notre Dame's behalf to kind of honor their word at the end of the day. And that's just kind of, initial thoughts, I guess.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, I don't think I mentioned this, but this revision that they talked about, that they made to the House settlement yesterday, it permits schools to grandfather in student athletes. It does not require schools to grandfather in student athletes. So even if the grandfathering in, even if the House settlement is finally approved by the judge out there in California, even if it's finally approved, like, it just allows schools basically to make the choice. It's still not going to force schools to have to grandfather them in. So for Notre Dame to be out front in this, I think is awesome. And the fact that that Pete Bevacqua came out and said, "Look, we're going to do it. We're going to honor this. We're backing up what we told a player that he was going to have when he came here. We're not just going to leave him hanging out there." And I mean, really, it's not a lot different than what their philosophy has been, leading up to this, because
it's not all about football.
Well, yeah, scholarships, like scholarships have always been, like it has to be renewed every year, so a school could pull a scholarship from a guy if they decide that, he's fourth string on the depth chart and they didn't want to honor it anymore. School could pull that, and like the guy would be hanging it. Like, I think Dion did that to some guys when he came in at Colorado that first year. He just kind of yanked the rug out from underneath some of those guys. But like what Notre Dame has always done, every year when people start wringing their hands a little bit about, the roster, we're at 89 players, how are we going to get to 85 and all that kind of stuff, and then a couple guys medically retire, well, like those guys are, like Notre Dame still honors the scholarship. They've still, honored everything that they told them they were going to have, even if they say, hey, look, we're not going to be able to keep you on the roster because we've got to get to 85, whether it's medical retirements or, they just decide, hey, you're like deep on the depth chart. So you're not going to be able to, to stay on the roster, but they do allow them to stay in school, and they do, continue to honor the scholarship that they gave them before they came here. So it's really, really it's not much different from what Notre Dame has already done, but I do think it's very significant that Pete Bevacqua is getting out in front of this and kind of giving some other schools the opportunity to kind of follow the lead of Notre Dame and be able to step up and honor them themselves as well. Because again, they're not required to grandfather these players in, but they are allowed to do it. So I think it's great that Notre Dame is doing that. So the Notre Dame Clemson scheduling agreement runs through 2037. Scale of 1 to 10. What chances do you give both Marcus Freeman and Dabo Swinney to still be at their schools when this contract ends?
A 2 out of 10.
Okay.
I think maybe a fun spin on this is, who do you think has a better chance to be there in 2037, Dabo Swinney or Marcus Freeman? This one's hard for me. I guess I'll kind of give you a little insight on my thought process.
Okay.
Dabo Swinney, I think, kind of has a lifetime contract at Clemson, as long as he's not like 6-6 every year, or if he's like 8-4 and above every third or fourth year and predominantly stays around that 9-10 win average. I think he's a guy that, he's won national championships. I just think he's one of those guys that Clemson would kind of hold on to as long as possible. Even though the fans think one thing, I think the administration is very pleased with Dabo Swinney at the end of the day.
That's still now. And like, it's crazy. Dabo is 55. He's already going into his 18th season.
That's what I mean.
Coach at Clemson. Marcus Freeman's 39. He would be 53, 14 years from now when this contract ends. So, again, like Dabo would be 3 decades in at this point if he makes it to the end of this deal. And, he would be pushing 70 years old at that point. I just think that is a long time for anyone. 2037, DJ, is when this goes to. Because like Kirk Ferentz right now is the longest tenured college football coach, 26 years. He's going into his 26th year. Gundy at Oklahoma State and Kyle Whittingham at Utah are going on their 21st seasons. And it's kind of amazing. Kyle Whittingham took over at Utah when Urban Meyer left to go to Florida, and Whittingham is still there at Utah 2+ decades later. I think that's kind of crazy. So but nobody else is even at 20 years. It's those 3 guys. And so, again, Dabo would be going over 30 years, 14, actually it would be, 14 years from now. And Marcus Freeman would be 17+ years at that point. So I got to put this at a 1. I just you just don't see, like Brian Kelly made it 12 years, Newt Rockne, 13 years in a completely different era. It's just like for Notre Dame specifically, being the Notre Dame football coach is like being the president. It ages you differently because of all the things that you have to keep up with. I feel like Marcus Freeman is either in the NFL or he's an athletic director someplace that many years from now.
So and that's kind of for Marcus Freeman. My argument would be, I think he's gonna get into some nice success here. I think he's gonna get a national championship done at Notre Dame, if we're being honest. And I think that's gonna kind of start a poaching situation of maybe the NFL or kind of stuff you were talking about. So that's what I'm more concerned about with him. And then I think DJ brings up a really good point too. I see Dabo following that Greg Popovich, Brad Stevens type situation where you coach forever and then you go on up into the administration level. So,
and it's kind of a Southern, those SEC schools, like Skip Bertman retired after, a Hall of Fame career as LSU baseball coach and became the athletic director at LSU for a few years. Ray Tanner won a couple of national championships as the South Carolina baseball coach. He became athletic director. Cohen at Mississippi State did the same thing. Interesting that the baseball coaches got those gigs, but that's kind of a Southern thing where you get promoted, you kind of move up the food chain and you get out of coaching and you become the athletic director at their school. I could definitely see that for a guy like Dabo down there at Clemson. And then he ends up ultimately hiring the next coach down there. I agree, Tommy. You really can't count Newt, but at the same time, it was 13 years. Like I said, a completely different different era. 100 plus years ago at this point.
This just reminded me of something. All this talk about Saban and the NFL. When I was listening to that podcast last night, Lane Kiffin said that he believes Saban will end up in the NFL. Actually,
I don't see that.
Well, he doesn't want to
he
coach
knows
in
him.
college, and he's itching to coach. Basically, he's itching to be around football.
So he's got but I don't see him being a fit for the NFL. He found that out the first time. That's why he left Miami, to come back to Alabama to begin with.
Just interesting to chew on.
I think that he would make an interesting general manager, like an evaluator of talent. Like I think that would be a better fit for Saban than coaching in the NFL.
Crunch film all day, baby.
Yeah. But I agree with Andrew. The NFL is so attractive to coaches because, especially nowadays with everything going on in college football, with all the money and the transfer portal. I mean, that's why, like guys like Saban ultimately decided to retire, and other coaches, if they given the opportunity, they would much rather be in the NFL and just have to worry about coaching football year round than worry about all the other stuff, the academics and the recruiting and the the transfer portal and all those other things that come with it. So yeah, another good point by Andrew. The Giants would be desperate.
That's what I mean. Dabo's got like maybe one more year left in the cooker.
There's always going to be like look at the Jaguars going after Urban Meyer a few years ago.
There's someone always going to be desperate.
Mm-hmm. But again, I just don't see Nick Saban's style working well in the NFL in comparison to college. That's why I think especially at his age, just evaluate the talent.
Well, in college, you can be the control freak. You can control everything.
Exactly.
In the
players
NFL,
control everything. Yeah. That's exactly right. Yep. All right. So we've talked about Clemson a bit this week. The Irish won't actually face them until 2027 when that series starts. But let's play our little game here. We're going to take a look at Clemson's schedule for the season and predict their over-under win total. Feeling confident on this one?
I am feeling confident on this one.
They start off against LSU. I mean, I think that is best case, a toss-up for both teams. It would be very fun if Brian Kelly were to lose a season opener for a fourth straight year. Then they take on Troy, Jared Parker, in week 2. Then they go to Georgia Tech, then Syracuse, at North Carolina, at Boston College, home against SMU, home against Duke, home against Florida State, at Louisville, home against Furman, at South Carolina. Not the most challenging schedule. I mean, besides LSU, like what's the next most challenging game for them? South Carolina at the end?
SMU could potentially provide some troubles.
Yeah.
I think maybe Syracuse. You never know what Florida State's going to be. I think Louisville is going to kind of have a drop off this season. Yeah, I mean, I think LSU. That Georgia Tech game might not be. I think Clemson wins it, but I still think it'll be a close game. Yeah, I mean, between just on paper, I think LSU, Georgia Tech, SMU, and South Carolina are kind of the toughest. I would set their win-loss at 10.5, but I believe it's going to be set at 9.5.
See, that's my gut says 10.5. I'm thinking the same thing when I look at this schedule.
You don't see a lot of those lines on FanDuel, like a lot of one-loss teams, and so
that's very high. Like you have to be Georgia, Alabama,
Ohio
those kind of schools, to get the 10.5.
So I think it should be 10.5, but I think FanDuel is going to put it at 9.5.
All right. So you're going 9.5. That's what I'm going as well. My eyeball agreed with you. 10.5 is the eyeball, but I agree with that philosophy, that you're, or that rationale that you're going with. So we're both going 9.5 as Clemson's over under, correct?
That's correct.
Last chance to change. All right. Here
Final
we
answer.
go. Clemson's over under on FanDuel, 9.5.
There it is.
Well
What are
done.
the? I bet it's probably like minus 160 though.
The over is plus 100. The under is minus 122.
Wow. So that they think that they're going to lose 3 games. Actually, is what that's saying.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Isn't Cade Klubnik coming back for his like 20th
He is.
year?
He is.
I might have to parlay that with the Cowboys season over.
Yeah.
And
I
make
think
the money.
I like the line 9.5. I would go over on 9.5 personally.
Yeah, at plus 100, I would take that.
Yeah.
Everyone in this show just got some free advice, baby.
Yep. So that's on FanDuel. If you can jump on FanDuel and get those plus 100 odds on Clemson's over at 9.5, I would jump on those because, again, like even if you lose to LSU and South Carolina, which I don't think they'll lose both of those games, maybe there's like you're feeling pretty good. I think they won 10 games last year.
They'll probably split with those two, and then you're telling me they get 2 more mulligans outside of that? Like, come on, no way.
Exactly. So after more than a decade of experimentation with a 20-game men's basketball schedule, the ACC has decided to go back to an 18-game conference slate for the upcoming season and beyond. The move comes after the upper echelon teams in the ACC, like Duke, lobbied to cut the conference schedule to avoid playing deadweight teams that drag down their NCAA tournament resumes. So, Jesse, do you buy or sell this move by ACC men's basketball dropping from 20 conference games to 18 conference games?
I buy it with the caveat that those 2 games are filled with meaningful games. Don't schedule Furman out of conference or, South Dakota State, or like if you're going to say that, we're lobbying for this because it hurts our tournament resume at the end of the day, then add something that's going to boost your tournament resume.
Here's the irony of this. They want to get rid of 2 extra conference games because they're saying it's dragging their RPI or their power, whatever.
I call BS on that part, by the way.
You should call BS because the ACC had the worst non-conference winning percentage of the 5 major conferences last season.
So winning those conference games helped them get back afloat.
Yes. Even though they only had 4 teams make it to the tournament, the bottom line was they just didn't have enough good teams. They had Duke and a couple other good teams, and then North Carolina just got in. They only got 4 teams in the tournament last year. So
I think Andrew brings up a great point. It's not the ACC of the past. I think it's really top heavy. And so if you're some of those bottom teams, you would want to play more ACC games because it is going to, I think impact your schedule. And so again, I'm calling BS on the rationale, but if that's the rationale you're going to lose, then you need to schedule 2 tough non-conference games.
Exactly. They need to do better, and the only, again, the 4 of 18 teams that they got in is the lowest percentage of ACC teams to make it to the tournament since they expanded the field 64 40 years ago. So rough going for the ACC. You can drop it down, cut it out. I'm not exactly sure why they had 20 to begin with. Like the women's side has been doing 18. So the fact that the men were playing 2 more, I think it's
men's basketball,
to begin
college
with.
Basketball is such a unicorn. They do everything wrong. They have 2 halves instead of quarters like every other version. Now, they don't have the same amount of conference games that the women do. It's just get on track with everyone else. Stop being your own entity where you got to do all these different things. Just fall in line with the rest of basketball. And this isn't even college. Like every other form at all levels plays a different version than what college men's hoops plays. And it's just baffling,
And I mean, honestly, like all of these, as good as the SEC was and as deep as the SEC was last season, like the teams that succeeded, they had a pretty good track record when it came to transfer portal guys, and I think that that's probably something that these ACC teams need to do a better job of is transfer portal. That would go a long way.
Agreed.
Fill in the blank. It's blank that Notre Dame's lone home and home opponent in the ACC will be Boston College.
It's lame. It's boring. It makes me want to go to sleep.
Who would it be if you could choose? Because I mean, I understand it's like, okay, you got the two Catholic schools in the league. That's part of the problem for Notre Dame in the ACC. Like on the women's side, you've got a natural rival in Louisville because both programs have been good, and like the series has been very heated over the years. But the men just don't have that same thing. Andrew says Miami, I'm sure that Notre Dame would take the trip to South Beach every year, like they wouldn't complain about that.
Mine would be Louisville. I think that's I'm all about regional, baby. You know that. I talked about it yesterday. I like those regional games, and I just think Notre Dame and Louisville always play good games. I always think of that 5 overtime game or whatever it was, a few years back. I know Louisville had a better season on the men's side. So I think when you're talking about kind of two programs who, maybe had a little bit of success 10, 15 years ago, and now, is kind of stumbling to get back on their feet. I just think that makes sense. I want something that's going to produce good basketball, right? Like I'm not in it because I want them to play Duke or North Carolina. Like I want a good matchup that's good for both sides. I think Louisville and Notre Dame are pretty evenly matched for where they are right now in terms of being basketball programs. And again, it's still pretty regional.
Honestly, I think Syracuse
they always play really good games against Syracuse as well.
Syracuse or Pittsburgh, just in terms of, again, I get it. It's like they're pitting the two Catholic schools, Notre Dame and Boston College, against each other, and they're pairing them up, so, I don't know exactly how raucous Conti Forum is when Notre Dame gets out there. It's probably one of their better crowds. It typically is on the women's side anyway, but, like Notre Dame and Syracuse go back, to the Big East together. Obviously, Louisville and Notre Dame were in the Big East together as well, and Boston College was for a time. But it just, from a Notre Dame perspective, there just aren't that many natural fits. So, but like Boston College, just it doesn't do it for me. Honestly, I'd rather see them like revolve who Notre Dame's home and home is going to be rather than have it always be Notre Dame and Boston College every year. Because like even it I guess it makes sense because you've got Duke and North Carolina, so they've got to make sure that they're going to stay paired up and all that stuff. And I assume NC State and Wake Forest end up being paired up out there since it's only, you only get the one home and home, but it just doesn't turn the dial for me very much. Fill in the blank. The Dallas Cowboys trading for Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver George Pickens means blank.
It means that Jerry and the gang are finally cooking a little bit. I don't know what Schottenheimer has been pouring into Jerry's soda in the morning or his coffee in the morning, but Jerry Jones has made these comments in the past. We're all in, and never comes of it, right? Well, they really had a really good job of re-signing some key players that they needed to get, under contract. They let a couple guys walk that I think that they didn't need to re-sign. They made a couple transactions before the draft to get some spots. I thought they drafted really well. And then the number one thing, Cowboys media, Cowboys reporters were just bashing them the whole draft. You got to draft wide receiver. Why are we not drafting wide receiver? Jerry Jones is an idiot. And then, what do we have here? They had a really good draft, and then a week or two later, they bring in arguably one of the best wide receiver twos in all of NFL, right? And so on paper, it all looks good, but you still got to play the games and et cetera. But this is the best offseason I've felt about the Dallas Cowboys in a pretty long time, to be honest with you. And
Can't
again, I
disagree
don't
with that.
know. I don't know if it's if again Schottenheimer kind of injected some juice into Jerry and finally got into his head here a little bit, but it feels like we're not going down this insanity path anymore of doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. It's nice to see Jerry and the gang get out of their shell here a little bit and make some moves. You're the Dallas Cowboys.
It's shocking. Like I was totally blown away when I heard that. I got up yesterday and my whole timeline was filled with it. And it almost felt like, am I waking up on April Fool's Day? Like what is going on right now? Because like you can talk about, well, they should have drafted a receiver and all this different stuff. Look, getting a guy, you have to give up a 3rd round draft pick, and they swap some late round picks as well. But the bottom line is you've got a proven NFL receiver who you're going to pair up with one of the top 5 wide receivers in all of the NFL. And Pickens did his press conference today. You can't double cover both of them all the time. You got to have a safety. These are guys who are going to require a safety over both of them. You can't put a safety over both of them. I realize there are 2 safeties, but you can't do it all the time because there's only so many defenders to go around. It's just going to open so many things up. And you could have drafted a wide receiver, but you weren't going to get that, the kind of production
Proven.
and the kind of that you're going to get out of a proven wide receiver.
He could step in and be a wide receiver 2 right now.
Yeah.
So this makes Dak's life easier. This makes CeeDee Lamb's life easier. This makes their running game easier. Like everything gets easier when you add a wide receiver like this. So, and I read something too. George Pickens has the most receptions of balls 15 yards or more down the field. And Dak has some of the best accuracy and throws of 15 plus yards down the field. And you combine that with, like you said, who are you going to double, right? You're going to put your resources to CD. Okay, Pickens is going to be open. You're going to put some resources towards Pickens. You can move CD into the slot and let him, I don't know. I'm just really excited about this. And that's why I sent you that screenshot of their over-under on the wins and losses. There's no way they're not winning freaking more games than this.
Jumping over that 7.5 now. Sly Fox says Leon Lett on Thanksgiving priceless. Well, Leon Lett in the Super Bowl, you might call priceless as well, but they still won. So I'll take it. They still won the Super Bowls in both of those seasons. Andrew says he thinks the Schottenheimer hire is actually pretty decent. Great pedigree. His dad, Marty, and he learned under Pete Carroll. We said from the beginning, like the initial sort of sticker shock of hiring Marty Schottenheimer, it didn't jump off the page right away. But when you actually listen to the kind of things, that he's talking about, that he wants, the team and the offense to be, this is going back to those first few days when you heard his press conference. He wants to be, like Andrew's talking about Pete Carroll, he envisions the offense to an extent being what it was during Legion of Boom in Seattle, where it's just like Marshawn Lynch and a physical offensive line, blowing you off the line. Now, obviously, you've got different receivers than what they had up there, especially now that you add Pickens. But he wants to be a physical team up front. And now the fact that you can protect the quarterback and you've got these kind of weapons, I think just adds another dimension to that.
He's adding discipline and filtering out the BS. They selected players, all guys who are captains, all guys who come with great, you hear the guys that they drafted, you hear them talk about how they are as leaders, how they are as captains, and all that stuff. And I want you to bring up Mike's comment.
Well, because where is your documentation that he's a horrible, awful teammate, Mike? Because I've actually spent a lot of time watching NFL Network and ESPN the last 2 days, listening to them talking about him. And I've heard Peter Schrager specifically on ESPN, he's had some, he's had some emotional outbursts during games and on the sidelines. But from what, everything that he's heard, the guy Monday through Saturday, that George Pickens is actually a really good teammate. They haven't had, any disturbances behind the scenes. It's again, like you've seen some outbursts on game day, but not stuff where like this is a guy who's dividing the locker room and that kind of stuff.
So here's where I'm at. Yes, do you want to see him do better in terms of, the outbursts and all that stuff? Sure, but I view it more as kind of the fiery passion, kind of like the Des Bryant side of things, where you just get, and I've been in it too. Like you get so caught up in the heat of the moment and wanting to win and do well that you sometimes do some stupid stuff. And so I'm willing to give him a fresh start, knowing that he's coming into a better situation. Because let's be honest, if I'm George Pickens and I'm the wide receiver one as the Steelers, why would I not be upset with the quarterbacks that they're rolling out there, the offensive coordinators that they've been rolling out there, the offensive schemes that they've been rolling out there? Like, it would not be fun to be a wide receiver one in the Steelers offense the last 4 years.
Yeah. Again, like I haven't heard them say, like he's saying, listen to anyone who covers the Steelers. I haven't heard them say bad teammate. That's not the kind of stuff that I've heard, but we'll see, because the other side of Jerry Jones is that he doesn't mind a little drama, like he likes the boost of adrenaline. Actually,
listen, if Greg Hardy could play on the Dallas Cowboys again, George Pickens was definitely getting a little a call from Jerry Jones.
Yep. Fill in the blank. The most surprising thing that's happened in the NBA playoffs is blank.
The Celtics collapse at home. 2 games collapsing in the fourth quarter at home. But if you want to put big picture on this thing, I just say the home team struggles. Like,
that's like
OKC's the only team that has won a home game, and they did it last night finally.
After bouncing back from losing the first game and blowing a lead to Denver in the first game. Yeah, like big picture, just the fact that all the road teams won their first games. But like the biggest thing, well, 2 biggest things. One, Boston blowing 2 home games, 2 20-point leads into home games in their first 2 games of the series. And then when you look at the fact that Cleveland has lost both of their home games as well, and the way they lost that game the other day, you were telling me that didn't go over too well in your household. The Halliburton.
It did not go over well at all. It was really funny because I texted you. Naomi always gets so mad at me after like Cowboys and Notre Dame losses because you just get upset, especially the big ones like a national championship or the playoffs, and she'll go, "I don't know why you're being so dramatic. It's just a game. Why are you getting this upset?" The other night, good old Halliburton.
There it was.
Four points in the last 10 seconds of the game, and she's getting all hot and flustered. I'm like, now you know what it feels like after some of these Cowboys and Notre Dame losses. And it's not the same. Oh really?
Now you know. Now you know. Add a little expectation to your fire. Irish English just chiming in and says his 11-year-old son heard my voice and immediately asked, "Is that Brian Kelly?"
That's tough.
Dagger right here.
That's a tough one.
No kidding. Hit me hard on that one. But like, the difference right now between the Celtics and the Knicks is the Knicks have a closer, like they've got a dude.
That's what everyone talks about, freaking Jalen Brunson, but he closed out the Pistons and he's been closing out the Celtics. You could say what you want, but the man is a competitor.
Yep. Salty's got a question for you.
Well, the bridal shower is this weekend, so.
That's right. All right, well, that's going to do it for today. Appreciate all the great we in, we out questions. Appreciate you being here today. It'll be an all rapid fire show mañana, so we've got that coming up. Jesse, good stuff as always. Everybody else, hit that like button before you leave, and we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.
Deuces.